Thank you so much for staying tuned. If you just joined us, this is International Forum today. It's all about the Russia-Ukraine war, finding a perfect way to make sure that this ceasefire holds, a perfect way for peace to reign between these two countries. Me here in the studio, I have a legal practitioner sitting close beside me. He's no other person than Barrister Emmanuel. Oh, begging your pardon, Barrister Henry. Well, so Barrister, welcome to International Forum. I appreciate your comment.
Yeah, viewers at home, good afternoon. Once again, Happy New Year. Happy New Month.
New Year, new month,
new month,
whatever.
It's all the same. It's all the same.
Anyway, I get to call him Sonny. Yeah, he is a political analyst and entrepreneur, politician. Yes, no other person than a wonderful, wonderful friend. Honorable Musa Etiosa. Welcome to International Forum.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have another legal practitioner. Yeah, Gabriel Ehigiato, a wonderful political analyst, political commentator. Gabriel, welcome to International Forum.
Thank you, Missy, for having me. Good afternoon, Nigerians.
All right. For a reason, I'm going to start off with Honorable Etiosa Igebo. He made a prediction when all this started. And I was like, it's not going to happen. When you have the U.S. back in Ukraine, he said, Ukraine will suffer for this. He said this almost like 3 to 4 years ago when all this started. Right now, they are like calling for dialogue. They're like saying enough of the bombardment, enough of the killing, enough of the... Nobody seems to be holding Russia accountable. Well, Trump came into the picture, Trump came into the scene. It's like all is now going towards Russia's direction, despite the fact that Trump said he was angry with the way Putin is going about all this peace talk. Honorable Etiosa, what do you feel about this?
Yeah, well, he said he's angry. He also spoke about the Putin rhetorics. He did mention that he thinks that Zelensky at the time was a dictator. That is just probably as the event unfolds, depending on the very complex nature of how the negotiations are going. That is something you should expect in a very difficult circumstances like this, because you know, when you go into a war, people, personnel are committed to a war, and then the people eventually they lose citizens on the both sides. And when you start to make progress and you think that you're having an advantage over the enemy, you know, at the end of the day, you look at the numbers of people you've lost, you may think it might be maybe a possibility to even push it a little bit further, and then maybe just cover a little bit more territory. So to me, I think the Russian-Ukraine war was a case of the little man taking on the big man, which is something that I've always said before. And you can't be relying on lending a certain nation, group of nations lending you arms to fight with somebody who can actually produce arms that is on the highest level in terms of sophistication. So I just personally think that from day one, like I said before, it was a mistake on the part of Ukraine. I think personally, it is a kind of a negative, wrong advice from the European Union, who are a certain group of people who was in power at the time, the neocons, that believed that it was right for Ukraine to take on Russia, that Russia's stockpiles may not last more than 6 months. We are 4 years on, the war is just literally starting, because they said the enemy of my enemy is my friend. As much as the European Union and the American government at the time, people of the same ideology was in power, Russia was not the only perceived enemy. They find China as the enemy, they find North Korea as the enemy, Iran as the enemy. So those people will eventually rally around to support Putin, because it's almost like a Russian state. It's almost like the whole European Union, the whole the United States and all the superpowers going against, using a little man, a little country to offset the issue of joining NATO. I'm surprised 4 years on, Zelensky has not been able to join NATO, and his heavy, high-level inexperience as well has created a lot of loss of unnecessary lives in Ukraine, constant occupation and taking over loads of territories. When you look at the description of the areas to oversee in a ceasefire, over 2,000 kilometers long. 2,000 kilometers long.
Over 2,000 kilometers.
Yeah, that is a whole lot of land and area to cover.
All right.
To understand who might jettison the peace agreement. So to me, I just feel for the people of Ukraine, and I think that Russia will come to the negotiating table because Trump does have the capacity to get them to want to do that, the relationship with Putin, but not without some level of like pounding a little bit.
Okay, all right. Now, well, Barrister Heron was, what have to say about that? You said there must be pounding. As it stands right now in Saudi Arabia, it's like the talk was between Russia and the U.S. on one hand, and of course, the Ukraine and U.S. on the other hand, but it's almost like, you know, made by Russia and U.S. People like saying that Ukraine is being sidelined in all of this.
Not really that they are sidelined, because there's meeting on Tuesday after the meeting between U.S. and Russia. But you also find out that some experts are claiming that Russia seems to have better concession in respect of the negotiations as it's going on, because they are asking that some of the reliefs in the sanctions be removed, so that they can have an easy pathway in terms of their grain, as well as Moscow also, bringing up the issue of the fertilizer, So you find out that, in actual fact, Russia seems to have an edge over Ukraine in terms of but you also find out too that they too are not relaxing, as it were, because as within the 30 days of ceasefire, there are still attacks, especially from Russia. You know that over 99 persons, 23 children among them were injured, and then over 227 drones that was shot by Ukraine were all intercepted, though they have minimal damages, as it were, in Russia. But I know, just as Trump said, he said at the end of the day, Putin will be able to agree to their whatever is putting before them, so that at the end, this war that has been on, that has caused a lot of damage, not only to Russians, but as well as but Ukraine has suffered more because of the number of children, the number of men that have died through this war. But I know at the end of the day, there's going to be peace, but it is not going to be quick, but it will come gradually based on the agreements that is going on. And if at the end of the day they agree as planned, I know there will be a ceasefire completely.
All right, Barrister Gabriel, you've heard both of them. Now, despite the fact that the talks of ceasefire, and of course talking about the options on the table, these two nations are still at each other's throat. You get to hear about drone attacks. Still they're negotiating. You get to hear Russia accusing Ukraine of violating the terms of ceasefire. You get to see Ukraine also accusing Russia of violating the terms of ceasefire. Both are, using drones on each other. But it's like Ukraine right now is worst hit. Do you think that this ceasefire plan or this peace deal will fall through?
Well, holistically, this is not the first time that the issue of peace, talking is on the table. When the war started somewhere around 2022, about 4 days later, maybe I think 28th of February, so to speak, the issue of negotiation, diplomatic negotiation, and ceasefire have always been ongoing, even during the war and all of that. But it is unfortunately, it's ironic that the Ukraine seems to be at the loser end, considering the number of personnel that Ukraine have lost, considering the level of deportation in regard to the children in Ukraine that was taken to Russia and all of that. Before now, when you talk about the negotiation, NATO ceasefire and all of that, there will be a 10-point agenda, from the side of the Ukraine, presented to Russia in order to see how to manage the war and come to a peace talk. It should have to do with the release of the prisoners that were seized, officials that were arrested by the Russia, the issue of the children that was taken away from Ukraine and taken to Russia, the issue of Russia, Ukraine not be a member of NATO and all of that. Just the way he said that. It was an issue of the bigger power, pressing the smaller power. And I think I would, push my blame, just the way I've always, to the United Nations and other international organizations.
Why would you do that?
No, who have refused from the beginning to actually intervene in this war, so you have to bring peace together. Because it's just a one-man race now. That's the man of Trump, who is trying to bring peace to a world that learned for about 3 good years.
But some are saying U.S. is the UN.
No. Even at
the war against Russia.
No, if we say that,
defending Ukraine.
If we say that, then we have to also bring the issue of the role, Joe Biden played. Joe Biden never actually, to a very large extent, put more enthusiasm the way Donald Trump is putting. Maybe at the end of the day, would that be here? If you are saying that the U.S. is a sole representation of the UN, then what have the U.S. past government done before the incoming of Donald Trump? Okay. So all of this, the war, the escalation, and all of that, one of the things I've triggered it is the silence of the United Nations and other international organizations. Even in NATO, I've done nothing or little to assist Ukraine. Neither European Union come to their aid. So it will be a battle of, fighting all the game by yourself. And it doesn't really make sense at all. It doesn't show that, it doesn't reflect the advantage you have when you become a member of the international organization.
All right, I'll come back to you, Barrister Gabriel. Let me come to Honorable Etiosa Igebo. Now, some of the conditions on the table, let's start off with the children. Ukraine said, look, we want our kids back. Russia said they took those children for their own safety. Now, do you feel that Russia would just wholeheartedly release those children to Ukraine? Haven't been with Russia for 3 years. Who knows the kind of indoctrination or the kind of, a mentality that have been given to these particular sets of kids about Ukraine-Russian relationship? Do you see Vladimir Putin saying, okay, fine, let's give them back their children as a token or a goodwill to the ceasefire options?
Just like I keep saying, and I'll continue to say it, it's just heartbreaking and completely shocking to see certain people speak about 20,000 children taken that possibly could have been killed with a couple of bombs dropped in their territory. It further strengthens my resolve of why I said 4 years ago that Ukraine would lose this war. But one of the things about life, to understand how things work, and anything you do is to understand the beginning to the end. Even before you start getting yourself involved in it. If you cannot fathom to understand what the outcome will be from the beginning to the end, you would have been going into circumstances without certainty. And when there's uncertainty, anything can happen. And these kids and whatnot is probably one of those things that came out of the instance of war. Because in war, there's no rule of law. It further shows, with all due respect to the president of Ukraine, how inexperienced, Lucky Charm is. Somebody who will come into a system, and the next thing you want to do is to drag your country into war because you want to be part of NATO. When you already had a working bilateral relationship with Russia, in terms of the Nord Stream pipeline 1 and 2 that has gone through that territory into Europe, that they are getting a huge amount of royalties on. Because remember, on the supply of gas to Europe alone, Russia used to make $1 billion every day, or every week, or something like that. So if they make that amount of money, how much percentage of that money goes to Ukraine? I mean, look at the posture of Zelensky when he went to the US, sitting with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. It was completely utterly disrespectful. He did, at that point, he still didn't realize what he was involved in. And the minute the United States government ordered the pullback of not supplying them weapons, and they practically hasn't even gotten into the point of holding on to the satellite informations to target certain infrastructure in Russia, Zelensky ran back crying. That is a man that has been at war for 4 years. You mean for 4 years, you haven't found time to figure out that you are picking on an opponent that is way bigger than you? You are picking on an opponent that there was a rebellion in 2014. I'm not trying to support Russia in what they're doing. I know Russia has their own fault, but if we go back to history, Ukraine was part of USS Arrow. And then through decentralization of power and disintegration of nations in the USSR, or Soviet Union, Ukraine was born out of the USSR. It means that there's a lot of relationship and similarities between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And the Ukraine is a sovereign nation who has been living by themselves. Ukraine should have advised themselves what happened to Georgia during the time of President Bush when they were to set up a missile defense system in Georgia. Trump came and was brutal. Says no, it's not going to happen. Not on our backyard or in our backyard, whatever you want to call it. And then the time of Ukraine came. In 2014, Victoria Nuland, one of the foreign secretaries, was in Ukraine when they did the kind of a rioting like similar to the time taking place in Zimbabwe. Got rid of the elected president, democratically elected president, and then a pro-US or European president came in Zelensky, who was originally a comedian. He has never held the position of a councillor before. He has never held the position of a parliamentary before. He has never held the position of a regional governor before to understand how the government nitty-gritty works. It was dumped into there from being famous for being a comedian. And all of a sudden, what hits him next is that they are pushing him to go into wanting to bring NATO to Ukraine. And Russia vehemently said, no, it's not going to happen. At that point, they mobilized 100,000 tanks in the border. 100,000 tanks to go into Ukraine, and said, if you keep talking about going into NATO, we will invade Ukraine. That rhetoric went on for a period of a couple of weeks to a month. And Joe Biden, with all due respect, kept pushing Zelensky to his downfall now, that they should go into and make sure that Ukraine joins NATO. Today, Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine keys has been taken. Lands has been annexed in Crimea. When Putin was speaking the other day, they said, we were forced to annex Crimea. We were forced to annex Crimea because nobody will allow anybody to set up a missile defense system.
All right. Talking about the kids, one of the conditions that Ukrainians are really crying for, saying the kids that you took away from Ukraine, if we don't talk about ceasefire, talk about truth, talk about peace, you have to bring back those children. Barrister, do you think that those kids are far gone? Do you think that Russia will not return those children? Or are they going to say, okay, fine, for just for so token of peace or for brotherhood or whatever you want to call it, here are your kids. Take them back. What next?
Well, I know of a truth that if the ceasefire agreement comes to a complete point where parties agree, definitely the kids will be released back because their parents are still there in Ukraine. Their families are waiting for them. And 20,000 kids or more, as it were, you cannot take them away completely like that. And I know of a truth that wherever they are now, they must have been kept. Nobody knows what they have been going through for the past 3 years they have been away. Either they are attending school or they are just kept in a particular place where they are feeding them and just like that, or using them as a shield. Maybe when the drones will want to now fall on them. But I know with the way Donald Trump is pushing, just from the statement he made, he said he knows that Putin will adhere to some of the conditions that will be put before him. Because what matters most, there is peace in the world, and once there is peace, it will bring about development and others. Accepted, my brother here was talking about a smaller nation fighting against a bigger nation. There is no way Zelensky, no matter his position, he will sit down and watch his country overrun by Russia, and they will just watch things go bad as it were. He has to fight back, and that is what he's doing. So from the negotiation, as it were, if the negotiation goes through, the children will definitely return back to Ukraine because that is their homeland and their parents are there, families are there waiting for them to come back. So I believe strongly that if the negotiation comes to a complete end and the war between Ukraine and Russia comes to an end, those children will join. But for now, I know Russia will be using it as one of the weapons to delay their agreement for the truce, as it were, because they are also asking for some conditions to be met. But just as some experts have argued, they seem to be on a side that is getting more than Ukraine in terms of the concession. Because if the issue of the grain of the Black Sea gets through, the Moscow talking about the issue of the fertilizer and others, at the end of the day, Ukraine will have little or nothing to actually fall back. But to me, I believe that if the truth come completely, these children will come back.
All right. Well, Barrister Gabriel, one of the other conditions given by Russia is that Ukraine would never again talk about joining NATO. Do you see Ukraine agreeing to that?
Well, on the top list
Yes.
of the 10 peace plan agenda, the issue of joining NATO is not really in force. I think Ukraine are more concerned about the repatriation of the children that was captured by Russia, and in as much as those children are in Russia, in as much they are properties of war, they also have a right to be protected in accordance with the international children's rights law, which Russia is, of course, very aware of. So I do not have a panic that the children will be harmed or maybe indoctrinated or what have you. As far as they are properties of war, prisoners of war, they should be returned as, negotiations is being concluded and all of that. But joining NATO, I think that would be a strong bone on the neck of the Ukrainian government, because the sole purpose of the cost of the war and all of that is that Ukraine should not join NATO. They also consider the fact that Ukraine have initially been under Russia, a part of the USSR. So Russia is very passionate about Ukraine not joining NATO. And Russia do not mind. The first condition and the only condition, if Ukraine could agree to not joining NATO, every other thing will flow. But I do not see the realization because take it or leave it, the Ukraine also needed some level of sovereignty and some level of freedom. They're also very more interested on what they will gain when they eventually join NATO. So, by and large, that is the basis of the peace talk. That's the basis of the roundtable discussion and the diplomatic, conversation here and there. But if Ukraine will join NATO, only time will tell.
All right, only time will tell. Well, we're talking about land that, annexed about Crimea, that Russia said they were forced to annex Crimea. Some are saying, no, it's not true, that Russia just acted out of greed. And now they've conquered some territories also in eastern Ukraine, because they claim that those people that are crying for freedom from Mother Russia to come help them. Now, with all this land conquered by Russia, do you see them giving it back to Ukraine as part of the peace deal for ceasefire, Honorable Tiosa?
Well, sometimes it's hard to be in the studios and continue to discuss matters to do with the Ukraine and Russia war, where obviously everybody's opinion would count as much as they want to say. Before I talk about the issue of land, my brother here, Barrister, spoke about the small brother taking on the big brother, and Ukraine being a sovereign nation. I'm sure he's aware before this war that Ukraine has always been a sovereign nation. I'm sure he's aware that Ukraine has always had elections and had its own presidency. I'm sure he's aware that the only first time that the issue of Russia and Ukraine war came up in this 20th century was when Ukraine said they were going to join NATO. Before that, they were a sovereign nation. When the U.S., under the leadership of, I think it was Joe Biden in the first tenure, with Lieutenant Newland being one of the warmongers among the American government, going to Ukraine when there was an uprising over the fact that maybe the government was corrupt, and then they chased out the president from the presidential villa. I don't think at that time they realized that Ukraine was a sovereign nation. So if we have gotten here and people still speak on the fact that Ukraine is a sovereign nation, it has to defend itself because of the fact that Russia is a bully, to me, I think that is a wrong narrative. It's not a correct one. Because at the end of the day, Russia has their pipeline going through Ukraine. Ukraine at the point during the war, I think into the second year of the war, part of the sanction was that they were going to shut out the Nord Stream pipeline not to supply gas through the territories of Ukraine, which means Ukraine was directly benefiting from the royalties on the sales of gas. So a nation that is not sovereign will not have that bilateral relationship with Russia. So that's just to address that. On the issues of the land, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that there will be a military strategic applications to that. Because the way Russia has spoken about the mixed agreement, that is said for 8 years, there are people who were Russian speaking was being killed. And Ukraine said Russia violated XYZ, and Russia is saying that our people are being killed. even with the Minsk agreement, we agreed that these Russian-speaking people are leaving Ukraine. We know that they're behaving like separatists now. They are rebels trying to fight to say that, okay, if you are killing us, we don't longer want to belong part of Ukraine. And they sat on the diplomatic table to say, okay, let us have an understanding that these people are Russian, but by land borders and adjustment, they're already part of Ukraine. They should stop killing them. When Zelensky came, after removing that pro-Russian president, the killing continued again. And that is what people don't talk about. For 8 years, they were trying to find ways to resolve. That is what President Putin was talking about a few days ago when he says, for a very long time, the issue of the Minsk agreement, we're trying to find diplomatic ways to say that they should stop fighting. They can't be killing and they don't supply arms through back doors to the rebels. And these are problems that have been ongoing that everybody, that he is saying is one of his concerns, why he cannot just jump into having a truce. Because they've had situations before where they violated, where Ukraine also violated. If not, before they go into the act of war, these issues have been going on for a long time. For some reason, there's a level of resistance to having those mixed agreements and the buffer zone created to stop the killings of those Russian-speaking. They were crying to Russia, we are Russian-speaking, they are killing us, they are killing us, give us weapons, give us weapons. Russia was reluctant until they started giving them weapons, until they now had to come in and then there was a full-fledged war. So in terms of having land, I think, yes, they will return most of the land ordinarily, but I think for lack of 100% trust, there may be areas of strategic importance to them that they may want to hold on to. And at the end of the day, all these troubles that has happened in Ukraine could have been easily avoided if they had an experienced president.
You keep blaming Zelensky for coming out to defend his own territory, that his experience. A commander body is the #1 man in Ukraine.
Tell you, that is
you can't take it from him.
That is why they said, in life you must learn as a child to sit and crawl. Crawl and walk and sit before you can learn to fly and perch. Ukraine was not on that level militarily. If Ukraine had their nuclear weapons and there was no disarmament from time on trying to resolve, I think this war would have been a nuclear war already. What I'm trying to say, why I blame Ukraine, they say it is you that wears the shoes that know where the shoe hurts you. You want to rely on borrowing arms from your so-called allies. You don't produce much arms, and you want to pick on a superpower. Ordinarily, you should advise yourself, who are the people dying now? The Ukrainians are dying. Not directly the Germans, not directly the Americans, not directly the British or the Spanish. It is the Ukrainians that are facing their fate now.
Right.
So that is why I'm laying the blames on the table of the inexperienced president who was a comedian that was voted into power.
His position as
Okay.
a comedian.
Hold on. Barrister, I'm coming to you right now. Because you're saying that, yes, some of these lands were given back to them, but not all. There may be some lands of strategic importance to Russia and we want to keep those lands. You feel that Russia will just give up all territories? After all, Ukraine said, look, we are going to take back every ounce of land taken from us by the Russians. Take it up from there.
Well, it depends on what is on the table for the negotiation that is going on. If, but I know of the truth that Russia might not want to release all the lands, as it were. Some strategic places must be kept in terms of security reasons, for enable them, be able to monitor the activities that is going on there. And you also find out that Donald Trump, from the negotiations that is going on, I don't think he has actually laid issues bordering on the land first. He's looking at other areas where the parties can have a meeting point. But I also believe that with the negotiations gradually, it's not going to be something automatic. It's not going to be something that will be quickly carried out. It's something that will go by stages. So I know that as it goes on stage by stage, Russia on its part might not want to reach all the lands that have been taken over. Some might still remain because for strategic purpose, because the issue of trust will always come in. We don't know what will happen later. So to me, not all the lands will go, as it were.
All right, Josh, Barrister Gabriel, you heard the brother saying that not all the lands will be given back to the Ukrainians because of Russia's conquest and the issue also of trust. Now, what do you feel will be the final string that Donald Trump can pull to make these two really see reasons why they should stop these hostilities?
Well, I see Donald Trump, actually being committed to to the issue of settlement and resolution of this war.
Don't forget that the trade out in between Israel and Hamas, they are still fighting.
Of course.
Don't forget that.
Of course, that is why Trump will have a very big role to play with all of this put together. And I see Trump actually, overblowing the head goal of Putin in order to bring out the arms and see how to relinquish all of those territories that was captured. Despite the 4 regions that were captured by Russia back to Ukraine. I also see the interference and the alignment of other nations, coming in. And now that we have an arrowhead, we try to bring peace and to bring us settlement. Just what Donald Trump is doing. So far, so good. His effort have been very well commended, and it showed that there's going to be a headway out in resolving all of those issues as regards to the war. But I do also think that Russia are going to relinquish all of those territories that was captured back to Ukraine until the first demand of Russia is being made, which is, Ukraine not joining NATO. Here's the way I said it before, that the whole purpose of this war was Ukraine trying to join NATO, which will go to threaten the security interests of Russia. And Russia doesn't want that. So if only Ukraine can step back to say we are not joining Russia, I think every other things will go follow. But by and large, Donald Trump is doing a lot of work. He's also putting a lot of strength. But I still wonder why countries like the Britain and some others are also pulling the same Trump is pulling in order to say how to resolve this war. Because if we were to be two superpower nations, or rather a nation, there's almost the same rank with Russia. By now we should be talking about war that will do with ballistic missiles and other weapons being involved. It's just because a super nation seems to be dominating a lower nation. That's why we are still having this tough landing. But better as this may, I see peace coming soon.
See peace coming soon. So what's the big deal with Germany saying enough is enough because of this war between Russia and Ukraine? It's like an eye-opener to them. They are saying right now they are getting set for war. Honorable.
Well, I think a lot of things are misinterpreted in this modern day world when there are so much uncensored information going out there, where media channels can be biased in a very negative way to create more crisis and tension amongst nations. I don't think Germany will get up and say that they are preparing for war. They might be speaking in the same way to say, well, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was to replace the original individual warfare machines that they developed. I remember many years ago in England, they demobilized several warplane carriers. They felt it was just too expensive to carry out military drills and have more warplanes carriers and submarines to, for example, if something was to go wrong, to defend themselves. For them to come together as a nation, it gives them a larger spread as a nation of states coming together. But a lot of those things to do with what has happened to Russia and Ukraine now, with Trump coming in as the US president, shows that it takes a very thin line to get that alliance shaken. So that is why I think Germany wants to go back to say, well, we have the capacity and the ability to do and prepare our own state and nation for any eventualities in the future. And I believe England will be doing that quietly, because remember, Germany was a superpower, England was a superpower, France used to be a superpower, Russia was a superpower, US, these are power play amongst power, resource, and control. So if Germany wants to start doing that, it means that this Trump's coming has created a crack within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization formation of what they've used as a way of wanting to constantly expand to the east. Because it's about the expansion of NATO to the east that is the problem. I mean, just the other day, Donald Trump said that the US aid was used to foment and sponsor Boko Haram in Africa. That is something that is supposed to be for a positive outcome. But now somebody has come up because he's hurt or he feels bad about the way he was treated by the same colonial masters who has always has dominance in terms of economic warfare, industrialization, millennium achievements, sustainable, development goals. These are the nations or state of nations that has always championed those goals. And if today he believed that if I was gone, I would not be able to challenge these people head on. He said, I'm the most investigated, my house was raided. All this sort of ill feelings towards what is happening. I think it just helped going now with the strength that the U.S. have to practically create a problem, which is now making the European nations to think, well, just like Barrister said just now, it says Britain and all these other countries are not towing the same line because that is not their ideology. As far as they are concerned, I think Putin was speaking the other day, says, well, Britain, what's his name? The former mayor of London, who was prime minister, Boris Johnson, came to Ukraine, and from the information they got was that he encouraged Ukraine to not ever to agree to not join NATO, and at the end, where is Boris Johnson today? He's no longer the prime minister. He's gone. So this power play amongst them, when the elephants fight, the grasses suffer. I'll continue to say that Germany is doing what they are doing now. I'm sure UK will be doing the same. France will be doing the same. If they are trying to stop Le Pen, who is pro-Russia, from becoming president of France, by using this same game they did with Putin, Trump not to contest, you can already see that there's already a mischievousness amongst those, power dominance over the years, over several decades. And, what is constant in life is change. And I'm very sure that change will continue to happen. Yes, there are many good things about them, but there are also very negative things about them. And I think anybody that is in the position of Ukraine that has this trouble, what might happen tomorrow, they say, okay, well, Zelensky, you leave Ukraine. Let us bring a new president. Come to the US or come to a European country somewhere.
I was coming to that. Because someone saying that might be the last option, because even Putin is talking about it, saying that man should be position for them to even start talking when they have meaningful parts.
But it's not possible. It's not possible for Zelensky to leave office to never have it. The man.
Remember that the election time has come and gone. He's been accused of dragging the election to the end that Trump called him a dictator. Doesn't want to leave power. He doesn't want to conduct the election.
You see, at the time they are now, it's a crisis period. It's not time for election because for you to conduct an election, it must be within the period where there is a relatively peace in the land. But presently, there is relatively no peace in the land. It has to settle the issue that is on ground, ensuring that whatever is the peace move that is being made, it comes to a formidable conclusion that will bring peace to the land, and then the people will not be talking about the issue of election. So to me, anybody talking about the election at this point in time does not mean well for the people of Ukraine, because the people of Ukraine are not talking about gathering for them to queue up the particular place they want to vote. What now happens if Russia decided to send drones to all those places where they gather? A lot of casualties will be there. So far, they have suffered a lot of casualties before now. So that will even multiply it, because you don't know those who are going to be there at the point of voting, as it were, or campaign. Will Zelensky at this point in time be talking about campaign, or the opposition themselves at this point in time? There's war in Ukraine talking about campaign, because if you are talking about election, you need to go around the countries and make sure that you sensitize the people about the change you want to bring. That the man who has been in office has not done well enough for the people, that you are now coming with a better package that will bring a better life for the people.
But that's what Putin is saying. Even Trump opined that this guy might not be the right man to discuss peace.
He is the right man to discuss peace. It is not necessary that he's going to be the only person. They have teams. Right. In Saudi Arabia, that those who came from Russia and those who came from Ukraine, they were not necessarily that Zelensky himself must be there.
Thank you so much. Well, before we go 30 seconds each, do you see hostilities still going on between Russia and Ukraine, despite the fact that they are talking about peace? Barrister Gabriel, quickly.
Well, the presence of peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of justice. I think on a lot of those bases, what is actually needed is justice. But we also hope that justice will be done.
All right. Honorable Echosa.
Well, I want to personally completely disagree with Barrister on the idea of having Zelensky to sit there and negotiate. I'm telling you that now. 4 years ago, we were sitting on this studio, even with the anchorman Wilson. We had our little views on the issues, and I told you, look, a time is going to come, Russia will have an edge. And that edge is going to be in our lifetime, God holding us here. I want to tell you that now. A time will come now, Ukraine will have no card. Trump has made it clear, they have no cards on the table. It takes them Starlink. It takes them to fall back to Starlink to get data from satellite. They have nothing. Russia don't need Starlink to get mapped out data to target areas. And I'm telling you today, we can have a kind of a little bit that before they engage in this deal with the way and the game that Putin is playing now, Zelensky will be out of the picture. It will be out. If they want, if they want to hold an election today, they will stop the bullet flying.
Right.
They'll hold their elections. Zelensky will be out. I think it's the disrespect. It's not because Zelensky cannot negotiate, but Zelensky does not have the skill. I bet you he will leave and they will negotiate and the peace will come.
Thank you so much, Barrister Henry. Briefly, our time is up.
To me, just as I rightly said, there's no way you can, at this point in time, be talking about election. The people of Ukraine should first of all settle the crisis on ground. Though I understand his argument that Zelensky, maybe because of his nature or because of the way he talks and his actions, but you also find out that a man who is pushed to the wall has no other thing than to fall back, and that is what
nobody pushed him.
Thank you. He said nobody pushed him. Well, you've heard them. They've heard their views and opinions. Peace talk is still ongoing, but the basketball is still going on. Russia is sending drones to Kiev and the rest of the Ukrainians are trying to, hit the little they can hit. But in the Prince of George, do you think that peace eventually will come? Will there be a permanent ceasefire? Only time will tell. Gentlemen, appreciate you one more time. We'll do it again next week, Tuesday, God willing. Bye for now.